All right, let's move on to a bigger topic, and one that I think is going to generate some heated debate, which is theaters opening. So right before we started recording, a couple of two huge news items broke that are feeding into this conversation. One is that California is contemplating, or is actually going through with the process of reopening their theaters. You can open your theaters as of Friday, June 12th. Now, that doesn't mean that all locations are going to do it. And I don't think that it is addressed what they would show if they're able to open, but I'm assuming it would be retro programming, essentially. Behind that news that California was looking towards reopening is that AMC Theaters now plans for, quote unquote, almost all of their US and British theaters to be open in July, with NATO, the National Association, I was doing the other NATO, the National Association of Theater Owners, saying 90% of overseas markets are going to be running again by mid-July via the New York Times. Now, that puts everybody who cares about this show on track for Tenet on July 17th. But it brings up the question of, are we ready as a society to go back to the movie theaters? And I'll go first by just saying that I would go back today if we could. And I understand the fears and the dangers that potentially come with it, the health problems that come with it, and I understand the theaters are gonna have to figure out a way to juggle audiences, and we don't know the sizes. We hear 25% capacity in some theaters, and it's going to be like what a press screening feels like. Whenever if that happens and you go to a theater with 25% capacity, like, you will know what it's like when kind of the three of us go see movies. But the reactions that I've been seeing on social media from people who seem really adamant against the opening, or just pointing out how ridiculous this seems right now, from what I've seen from my own personal sampling, have been people who are in New York and LA, like friends of mine, colleagues who are in New York and LA. And it's very possible or probable that the situations in their cities is far worse than it is here in Charlotte. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we are as close to back as I can tell you. And it doesn't mean that our numbers aren't going up. And it doesn't mean that we're still not being cautious and trying to practice social distancing, but our businesses are open. Like, the only thing left that we can't do is eat in a restaurant or go to a bar. Those are the last two things but as you can, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, I've gotten my hair cut. Stores are opening, and they're all figuring out ways to evolve and practice social distancing. I don't think we're ever going to get to, not ever. We're not close to doing live shows and concerts. That seems like a different hurdle to overcome, but theaters feel like that's a space that we can manipulate the way other businesses are manipulating to practice social distancing. I think one thing that's tripping people up is that the theaters aren't requiring masks, that they're encouraging it, but it's not, you have to wear one to get in. That's the one thing I would change. I would think if you really want to go to the movie theaters, you probably should have to wear a mask. And I would wear a mask if I were going to go to one, but I personally am ready. How about you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in. I think Chicago, being a little bit bigger city than Charlotte, is probably a little bit behind the curve. We just entered what is referred to as phase 3 out of 5 phases in terms of like the reopening process. Pretty similar. Patios and stuff like that. Stores, not necessarily, essential stores only. But no, I think if theaters are taking the proper precautions, and especially if, and obviously we'll get to this in a second, but like, if they're going to use every screen for Tenet, and then because of that have the luxury of only doing a 25% capacity, which means we're talking, like, in theory, like multiple seats between people, and staggered between the people in front of you and people behind you. I think that's a fairly safe scenario. If everyone's kind of on the same page, I'm with you. If everyone's taking the right precautions and the CDC is saying, yeah, okay, just be safe about it, why wouldn't I believe that?
And Kevin, not to jump in on you, but one thing that assists that is a technology that was introduced for convenience, but is now almost essential, which is the ability to pick your seat before you go. That was a convenience, but now theaters have a much better way of policing how many people are in a theater and where they're sitting, Whereas it used to be a free-for-all, right? Like you just went into a theater and you found available seats kind of thing. But you can use that technology now to know when house number 1 has X amount of people for Tenet, it's closed. Like we're not selling that house anymore. And I think that the theaters have the ability to keep a closer eye on something like that, which makes me feel safer about going back. Now, I have heard the argument about like, you don't know how air is circulated in theaters. It's essentially a dark room that you're sitting in for hours with a stranger. But I don't know. Like, I'm not trying to minimalize the risks that come with COVID, and we're still answering a lot of questions about it. But it's to me feels like it's the right time to go back.
Well, it's interesting because like there are certain things that are opening that I question as things that would be similar to a movie theater. If you go, I got my hair cut the other day and now again, I'm not in an environment with 100 people, but I'm in an environment with 10 to 15 people and we're not, there's no 6 feet apart. We're wearing masks, but I still went in there and got my hair cut. And, and again, I'm not minimalizing or comparing a haircut to a movie theater, but it's still a closed space with multiple people that are not 6 feet apart.
Did you guys have to, sorry, I don't mean to like interrupt, but the only reason I bring this up is I'm literally leaving this show to go get my first haircut in months. You guys have done it. Masks while you're getting...
a mask the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all the guy did was, it was really cool. Like he just lifts up like the part of your mask that he wants to go under. And then in between me and the next person were like plastic barriers. And honestly, I didn't find it to be scary. Now, listen, I think there's a really interesting debate to have here. Anybody who's out there that listens to our show who has lost a loved one due to this, that's a much different perspective than a lot of other people will be able to have on this, because then it becomes a much more personal element to you. There's just so many different questions here as things start to reopen. Haircuts, restaurants. I don't see a difference in going to a restaurant inside versus going to a movie theater. So so unless you're going to say no restaurants can open inside until a certain time, I feel like movie theaters should be in that same boat. I mean, do you guys think I'm crazy for saying that? Or
no, I think that's 100% fair. But the other event that feels like not safe to me is a sporting event. I wouldn't go to a sporting event because it seems like too many. It'd be harder to police where people sit at a sporting event than it would be a movie theater.
All right, so let me ask you this. So, Sean, let's say you and Michelle and the kids are going to go see Tenet on July 18th, Saturday afternoon at your local movie theater. I'm assuming that these. So, I love the way you used the word manipulate earlier. Theaters have the ability to make this work based on the guidelines that we're seeing. We've seen guidelines that say limit your screens to 25%, etc. Seats in between. Those are all things that people can actually do and achieve in the theater. So the theaters have the ability to actually police their own. And they will, because they want to open and they will make it this. Dude, when I went and got my haircut, when I walked up to the guy, he already had a sanitizer waiting for me, sprayed my hands, cleaned all of his materials in front of my face to make sure I knew they were clean. And then I felt completely safe. If I walk into a movie theater and I know that they are following the legal guidelines. And so my question to you is, Sean, if you want to go 4 people to a movie theater, how do you tell the ticket system that you're a family, that you want to sit 4 together?
Interesting.
And not sit apart? So I'm wondering if that's going to be a thing where it'll give you an option to say, okay, if you're with this person, you're comfortable to sit next to them, we'll allow you the 4 seats together, then we're going to space you apart between 6 other seats or something like that. I don't know how they're going to do that.
Even if you went as a group, like like a group of couples that wanted to go see whatever the new movie was. That's a great question. I'm not sure. And
to simply answer the question before we move on, yes, I would go to the movies today. You guys know my feelings on it, but there's an element there where everybody has their own story about how they've been affected by this, and you may or may not feel that it's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. I just feel like we are in a time period where we're learning how to adjust to our situation, and it's a terrible situation, but we're trying to find ways to adjust to keep the lives going, and haircuts and all these places that are opening.
Yeah.
I think movie theaters deserve to be within that reopening phase.
And I in no way do I want this to sound insensitive, but there's no perfect time to open any of these situations. And I just feel the businesses need to sort of rip the Band-Aids off and almost learn a little bit how to correct things as they go. But it's amazing. I just want to point this out and then we'll move on. Where we are now versus a month ago, where a month ago we probably said there's no way in hell. We held on to Tenet as much as we could.
But a haircut a month ago sounds insane.
Yeah.
That sounds insane to me, but I went out and got one and it was fine.
Jake, you're going to look amazing. Look how good Kevin looks. My God.
Yeah,
I know. He always does. Oh, don't wrap us, Gabe.
We're talking about how good Jake's going to look.
All right, so we all agree you think it's going to open?
Yeah,
I'm
convinced.
July 17th, Tenet will be in theaters.
Yes. I think so.
What happens to Unhinged? I saw a trailer for Unhinged last night. It's still coming out July 1st in theaters.
Kevin, what do you mean what happens to Unhinged? It's bringing people back to the theater. It's saving cinema.
Yes, it's saving
That's
cinema.
what happens to Unhinged.
Thank you, Russell Crowe. All right.